Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm watching a movie about some foreign country that's slipping and sliding into a dictatorship. Except this isn't fiction, and it's not Hollywood, and it's definitely not a foreign country. What we're literally watching is Trump, MAGA, the GOP, and the Supreme Court lead us into authoritarianism right before our eyes. Now, I'm not surprised. And if you've been a subscriber of this channel, you shouldn't be surprised. Because I read Project 2025 and made multiple videos warning you about its racist and authoritarian blueprint. I told you. I told you it was coming. And it would be bad, especially for black people. And now Trump has told the El Salvadoran president that he will be sending not only immigrants, but homegrown criminals to their prisons. And who do you think will be going first? That's right, black men. And many of you didn't believe that this could happen. But as a lawyer who studies constitutional law, I knew better. I knew it could happen. I knew authoritarianism could rise in this country. So what is authoritarianism? Authoritarianism is when the executive branch of a government, of a country's government, gains unchecked, unparalleled power, often at the expense of the other branches of government like the courts, the Congress, and so on. And you need only look at countries like Russia, North Korea, Hungary, Turkey, which are all countries that Trump admires their leaders. In America, it's happening under Trump, under MAGA, under SCOTUS, under the GOP. And it's powered by white nationalism. Because if Trump or some other MAGA leader can control the country through the executive branch, then it can check civil rights. Civil rights goes out the window in an authoritarian type of country. Just like what they're doing. They're using anti-DEI executive orders and lawsuits and so forth. But again, as I just explained, the focus is on civil rights or anything that benefits African Americans. And one of the clearest examples of Trump consolidating power in his hands is the immigration case of Abrego Garcia. It is very clear what is happening in this case. If not, I'm going to explain it to you. His case is critical because if Trump can gain certain concessions from SCOTUS regarding deporting people, including American citizens, and consolidate that power, it could, and it very well will, have ramifications for all Americans, and especially African Americans. Now, let me break it down. Mr. Garcia is a Salvadorian man who could not legally be deported to El Salvador because an immigration judge in 2019 had determined that returning him to El Salvador would subject him to a clear probability of future persecution, I believe he said. And that decision was final and it was binding. And it's still binding today. However, ICE detained Mr. Garcia in Maryland in March 2025 without any new legal authority and secretly deported him to a dreaded jail or prison in El Salvador. No notice, no hearing, no due process. And this was not a mistake. This was the American government being very intentional under Trump, ignoring that 2019 court order. Now, I want to say, and I want to be really clear about this. I am all about secure borders. I am all about getting dangerous gangs out of the country. I'm all about that. There is no exception in my mind. But the rule of law, due process, is really important. And it's really, really important for those of us who don't hold the power in this country. It is really, really important for minorities, especially the minorities who have been enslaved and segregated up to 60 years ago. So someone would say, why are you saying this and trying to help who may be a gang member and who's in the country illegally come back? Because I know authoritarianism will not be good for my group of people, African Americans. We need every check and balance there is so that the government cannot do to us what the government did to us for 350, 60 years. So if it means bringing back into this country a man who may be a gang member and a man who may be in the country illegally so that he can have his due process rights protected so that mine and ours and yours can be protected, I'm all for it. Although I definitely appreciate secure borders and keeping out dangerous gang members. All right, now with that said, Garcia sued the Trump administration, and a district judge heard the case and ruled that Mr. Garcia's removal, it contradicted or it violated a long-standing court order, and his detention in that El Salvadorian prison is doing him irreparable harm. That's the standard that is used when we attorneys ask a judge for immediate relief. That if you don't move right now, judge, if you don't do this now, my client's rights are going to be irreparably harmed, meaning we're not going to be able to repair the harm that is being done to him. And so the judge delivered a very powerful rebuke to the executive branch, to the Trump administration. She commanded that the United States or the Trump administration both facilitate and effectuate Mr. Garcia's return to the United States. Now, this was not a question. This was not a suggestion. It was a court order. And she used two very important words. Again, facilitate and effectuate. Now, facilitate means that the government had to assist in getting Mr. Garcia back to this country. And like AG Pam Bondi said, that would include providing an airplane to fly him back. And of course, they argue that that's all they have to do. But there's another word that I just told you, and that is the word effectuate. And it means the government must cause him to be brought back to this country and can't leave it up to the El Salvadorian president. They must make it happen. So the judge wasn't simply issuing a polite try to bring him back, try to get him back in this country. No, she was issuing an imperative, an order. In other words, she was saying, get it done. Now, the Trump administration did what it has the right to do, which is ask the Supreme Court to block that judge's order. I have no problem with that. We do it all the time. If you don't like what the judge ordered, then you ask a higher judge to block what that judge ordered. So they asked the Supreme Court, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to block what the judge ordered. So now things were squarely in the hands of the United States Supreme Court, SCOTUS. And what did SCOTUS do? Well, the conservative majority, remember there are 6 of them out of 9, sided with the Trump administration. And they wrote an order that gave the Trump administration a lot of wiggle room. So SCOTUS's order said, yes, you got to facilitate his being brought back here. And remember, facilitate just means you got to assist. But it said the word effectuate that the judge used, the judge must clarify that, because the judge may have a definition in her mind of effectuate that gets over into foreign policy, which is the domain of the executive branch. So SCOTUS basically said, yes, help facilitate, which doesn't mean bring him back. And meanwhile, we want you, the lower judge, to tell us what you mean about effectuate. And if you go too far in it, that's going to be something that the Trump administration will have to work out and not you. Or at least that is the way that the Trump administration has interpreted what SCOTUS did. All right? I don't agree with that interpretation. I think that the lower court, when she said effectuate, she meant just that, bring him back. And it doesn't have a lot to do with foreign policy. It has to do with a pending court order. Now, granted, the president is tasked with foreign policy. Okay, there's no question about that. That typically is something the president has a lot of authority over. It doesn't mean that the other branches are not also involved, because let's say the president came up with some foreign policy that involved some funding. Well, the funding comes from Congress. So he would have to get Congress to fund that policy. And if the courts thought the policy was unconstitutional, then the courts have the right to review it under Mulberry v. Madison. But yes, in terms of formulating foreign policy and dealing with foreign countries, that is something the executive branch does. And Trump is broadly interpreting that. In other words, we don't have to obey your court order if it has to do anything to do with foreign policy. I don't agree with that, but it's not going to be my decision. It's going to be what SCOTUS ultimately decides. So it remanded the case back to the lower court and asked that court, or ordered that court, to explain what it meant by effectuate. Okay? Now, I want you to give some serious thought about that, because SCOTUS is, again, stating that when a judge commands the executive to correct an unlawful deportation, she may be intruding on presidential powers. This court is going out of its way to protect presidential powers. Maybe you don't understand, so let me put it another way. Trump's deportation was illegal, and the government admitted it. The government conceded it. The man is incarcerated, Mr. Garcia, in a foreign country's jail in violation of a judge's order. And the Trump administration is basically saying, oops, but there's nothing we can do about it. Okay? Now, the problem with that is Justice Sotomayor, in her dissent, and she was joined by the other 2 liberal justices, she said the government has offered no legal reason for its actions. She said they've not justified why they were able to ignore this standing pending court order and just arbitrarily, unilaterally deport and jail Mr. Garcia. And Justice Sotomayor said something that is really, really sobering. She said, under that rationale, even U.S. citizens could be deported without legal restraint. Now, that's what she said. That's what a sitting member of the United States Supreme Court said. Basically, she's saying if the majority approves this, it jeopardizes all American citizens. We all could be deported because the Trump administration could just say, well, they're already over in some foreign country now, and there isn't anything that we can do because we can't effectuate bringing a person back, even a U.S. citizen, unless the other country does it. I mean, that puts all of us in danger of just being grabbed up, taken to a foreign country, and then the Trump administration saying, there's nothing we can do about it. We thought that he or she was a gang member or committed treason or something else. But there's nothing we can do now. We'll help facilitate it, but it's up to the foreign country if they will effectuate it. If SCOTUS gives Trump that concession, our country is completely different, and we are now definitely at that point dealing with an authoritarian government. That's where we are. I mean, I'm not trying to scare you. This is not fear-mongering. This is literally where the country is. And to make matters worse, yes, things get worse. Trump told the El Salvadorian president that he wants to send American criminals to his prison. Or to his prisons, because I believe they also talked about building more prisons over there. So you talk about prison for hire, for-profit prisons. This is it in your face. And again, who does that or who should that concern the most? Blacks. Because we also heard Trump say on the campaign trail that blacks commit most of the crimes. And that he wants to do stop and frisk. Where were these pro-black imposters and the blacks who followed their advice and voted for Trump or voted the couch? Where were they when Trump said all of these things? In other words, why would any black person, why would they have voted knowing what Project 2025 said? Or maybe they didn't, because I know a lot of them, when I would do these videos, they would show up on the channel saying, you're fear-mongering, you're fear-mongering, you're fear-mongering. Wow. And now here we are, all of us. I mean, this is just a horrible predicament to be in. I mean, the worst thing that I've seen in my lifetime. Because it moves us very, very close, again, to authoritarianism. Very close. In fact, many people believe that we're already there. I'm holding out hope that SCOTUS will do the right thing. Now, I know better than most of you what we have with 6 conservative members on the court. I'm in the courthouse nearly daily, litigating these cases. We have civil rights lawsuits pending. So we know I know from personal experience, what it means to have a judge who has a different ideology, I'll say, than you on civil rights. But I'm still holding out hope that SCOTUS will do the right thing and not give Trump those concessions and put that language in whatever court cases they hear that essentially says that, yes, it's okay to deport American citizens so long as you get them across the border before the courts can do anything. And in this case, they didn't care that the court order was already in existence. So pray that SCOTUS protects us and protect the rule of law. Okay? It's very important, you all. Don't think it cannot happen. We're so close already. All right, so I hope you understand what I have shared with you. If not, listen to this video again. Very important. All right, I'm Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video. And it's more important than ever that you stay woke.